The sun was setting over the small town where Sarah lived. She was barely 22, fresh out of college, and full of dreams that seemed as vast as the sky above her. Life at that moment felt like a blank canvas waiting for her to paint it with bold strokes. But what Sarah didn't know then was that some colors would fade, others would smudge, and a few would leave stains she'd carry for years to come. Sarah had always been a planner. Growing up, she kept journals filled with lists. Things to achieve, places to visit, people to meet. Her 20s were no different. She moved to the city with a suitcase packed with clothes, books, and an unshakable belief that success was just around the corner. All she needed to do was work hard, stay focused, and everything would fall into place. Or so she thought. Her first job was at a marketing firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And more importantly, it gave her a sense of purpose. Every morning, she woke up early, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat by the window of her tiny apartment, staring at the bustling streets below. This is just the beginning, she often told herself. But life had other plans. At the office, Sarah quickly realized that hard work wasn't enough. There were politics she didn't understand, expectations she couldn't meet, and colleagues who seemed to excel without breaking a sweat. She spent countless nights lying awake, replaying conversations in her head, wondering if she'd said the wrong thing or made a bad impression. One evening after a particularly grueling day, Sarah called her best friend, Mia. "I don't think I'm cut out for this," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Cut out for what?" Maya asked gently. "For life," Sarah replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "Everyone else seems to have it all figured out. Why can't I?" Mia chuckled softly. "Because nobody really has it figured out, Sarah. They're just better at pretending." That conversation stayed with Sarah for days. It wasn't exactly comforting, but it was honest. And honesty, she was beginning to realize, was something she craved more than anything else. As the months passed, Sarah started noticing patterns in her behavior. She was terrified of failure, so she avoided taking risks. She wanted to be liked, so she said yes to every request, even when it drained her. She compared herself to others constantly, measuring her worth against their achievements. It wasn't until her roommate, Emily, confronted her one night that Sarah began to see the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. "You're running yourself ragged," Emily said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "When was the last time you did something just for fun?" Sarah hesitated. Fun. That word felt foreign. Between work, social obligations, and trying to keep up appearances, there was no room for fun. "I don't know," she admitted finally. Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's a problem. Sarah, you're only young once. Don't waste these years chasing things that don't matter." Her words struck a chord deep within Sarah. For the first time, she allowed herself to question the path she was on. Was she truly happy? Or was she simply going through the motions, hoping that someday, somehow, everything would magically align? The turning point came during a weekend trip to the mountains. Sarah had tagged along with a group of friends, reluctantly leaving behind her laptop and to-do lists. At first, she felt restless, itching to check her emails and update her planner. But as the days went by, something shifted. She found herself marveling at the beauty of nature, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the sound of birds chirping in the distance, the crispness of the air. For the first time in years, she felt present. On the last night of the trip, Sarah sat by the campfire, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames dance. One of her friends, Jake, turned to her and asked, "What's the one thing you want most in life?" Sarah froze. She had never been asked such a direct question before. I don't know," she stammered. Jake smiled knowingly. "That's okay. But maybe it's time you figured it out." Those words lingered in Sarah's mind long after the trip ended. Back in the city, she began making small changes. She started saying no to commitments that didn't excite her. She took up painting, something she hadn't done since childhood. She even mustered the courage to ask for a raise at work, and got it. But the biggest change was internal. Sarah began to understand that life wasn't about ticking boxes or meeting society's expectations. It was about finding joy in the little moments, embracing imperfection, and learning to trust herself. By the time she turned 25, Sarah was still far from having everything figured out, but she had learned one crucial lesson. Growth doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it's also beautiful. And as she stood on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Sarah whispered to herself, "You'll get there, one step at a time." Little did she know, the lessons of her 20s were just the beginning. The real challenges and revelations were yet to come. Sarah's 30s arrived without fanfare, slipping into her life like a quiet storm. At 30, she thought she had finally found her footing. She had a stable job as a marketing manager, a cozy apartment she loved, and a small circle of close friends who felt more like family. On paper, everything looked perfect. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. It started with little things, sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was truly happy. Then came the bigger questions. Was this the career she wanted to pursue for the rest of her life? Had she settled too soon? And perhaps the most daunting question of all, what did she really want out of life? At first, Sarah tried to ignore these thoughts. She buried herself in work, attending meetings, meeting deadlines, and climbing the corporate ladder. Her colleagues admired her dedication, but deep down, Sarah knew it wasn't passion driving her. It was fear. Fear of failure. Fear of change. Fear of starting over. One rainy afternoon, while scrolling through social media during her lunch break, Sarah stumbled upon an old photo of herself from her college days. She barely recognized the girl in the picture. That version of her had been fearless, full of dreams and boundless energy. Where had that girl gone? The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of who she was. She had become so focused on pleasing others and meeting expectations that she had forgotten to listen to her own heart. Determined to reclaim a piece of herself, Sarah decided to take action. She enrolled in a photography class, a hobby she had always been curious about but never pursued. At first, it felt strange holding a camera again after so many years. But as she wandered the streets of the city, capturing moments through her lens, something inside her stirred. Photography became her escape, a way to reconnect with the world around her. It taught her to see beauty in unexpected places, to notice the intricate patterns on a leaf or the way sunlight streamed through a window. For the first time in years, Sarah felt alive. But just as she began to find joy in the little things, life threw her a curveball. Her company announced layoffs, and despite her hard work and loyalty, Sarah was let go. Sitting in her boss's office, listening to the polite yet firm explanation, she felt a mix of shock and humiliation. How could this happen to her? She had done everything right, or so she thought. For weeks, Sarah wallowed in self-pity. She updated her resume, attended interviews, and networked tirelessly, but nothing seemed to click. Rejection after rejection left her feeling defeated. Then one day, while sitting in a cafe nursing a cup of coffee, she overheard a conversation between two strangers. One of them said, "Sometimes, losing something you thought you needed is the universe's way of making space for something better." The words resonated with Sarah. Could it be possible that getting laid off wasn't the end of the world? Could it actually be an opportunity to start fresh? With newfound determination, Sarah decided to take a leap of faith. She dusted off an old dream she had long abandoned, starting her own business. For years, she had toyed with the idea of launching a creative agency focused on storytelling through visuals, but fear had always held her back. Now, with nothing to lose, she decided to give it a shot. The early days of entrepreneurship were grueling. There were late nights spent drafting proposals, countless rejections from potential clients, and moments of doubt that threatened to derail her progress. But there were also victories, small ones, like landing her first client, and bigger ones, like receiving glowing feedback for her work. Through it all, Sarah learned the importance of resilience. She discovered that setbacks weren't failures. They were stepping stones. Each obstacle taught her something valuable, whether it was patience, perseverance, or the art of letting go. As her business grew, so did her confidence. Sarah realized that success wasn't about titles or salaries. It was about creating something meaningful, something that brought her joy and fulfillment. But not everything in her 30s was about professional growth. Her personal life underwent significant changes as well. In her early 30s, Sarah had briefly dated someone named Alex, a kind-hearted musician who introduced her to a world of spontaneity and adventure. Their relationship was passionate and exciting, but ultimately unsustainable. When they parted ways, Sarah was devastated, but also wiser. She learned that love wasn't about finding someone to complete her. It was about finding someone who supported her journey while staying true to their own. More importantly, she realized that being alone wasn't something to fear. Solitude gave her the space to reflect, heal, and grow. By the time she turned 35, Sarah had transformed in ways she never imagined. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who doubted every decision. Instead, she had become someone who embraced uncertainty, knowing that life's greatest lessons often came from its toughest moments. One evening, as she sat on her balcony flipping through an album of photographs she had taken over the years, Sarah smiled. She had come a long way since her 20s, and even farther since that rainy day she lost her job. But she also knew that her journey was far from over. Life, she had learned, was a continuous process of learning, unlearning, and growing. And as she closed the album and gazed at the stars twinkling in the night sky, she whispered softly to her younger self, "You'll get through this. Trust me, you're stronger than you think." Sarah's late 30s brought with them a mix of triumphs and trials. By now, her creative agency had gained traction, earning recognition for its innovative storytelling approach. Clients praised her work, colleagues admired her leadership, and friends often joked that she was living the dream. But beneath the surface, Sarah carried a quiet weight, a lingering sense of imbalance between her professional success and personal fulfillment. Her days were filled with back-to-back meetings, client calls, and brainstorming sessions. Her nights were spent reviewing projects, answering emails, and planning strategies for the next big campaign. While her business thrived, her personal life felt increasingly neglected. She hadn't been on a date in months, her social circle had shrunk, and her once beloved hobby of photography had taken a backseat to deadlines and deliverables. One morning, as she sat at her desk staring at a blank screen, Sarah realized something unsettling. She was running on autopilot. She had become so consumed with building her career that she had forgotten to nurture herself. The breaking point came during a routine checkup with her doctor. After a series of tests, he delivered some sobering news. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your stress levels are through the roof, and it's starting to affect your health. You need to slow down before it catches up with you." Sarah left the clinic feeling shaken. For years, she had prided herself on being strong, resilient, and capable of handling anything life threw her way. But now, faced with the reality of her own limitations, she felt vulnerable and scared. That evening, sitting alone in her apartment, Sarah allowed herself to cry. It wasn't just about the doctor's warning. It was about everything she had been suppressing. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the fear of failure. She cried until there were no tears left, and then she made a decision. Enough was enough. Over the next few weeks, Sarah began making changes, not drastic ones, but small, intentional steps toward reclaiming her life. She hired an assistant to help manage her workload, set boundaries around her working hours, and carved out time each week for activities that brought her joy. She rekindled her love for photography, taking long walks in the park to capture moments of beauty and serenity. She also started prioritizing her relationships. She reached out to old friends she had lost touch with, apologized for disappearing, and made plans to catch up over coffee or dinner. To her surprise, they welcomed her back with open arms, reminding her that true friendship wasn't about quantity but quality. But perhaps the most transformative change came when Sarah decided to volunteer at a local community center. Every Saturday morning, she taught photography workshops to underprivileged kids, sharing her passion and skills with those who might not otherwise have access to such opportunities. At first, Sarah saw it as a way to give back to the community. But as the weeks went by, she realized it was giving her far more than she had anticipated. Watching the children's eyes light up as they discovered the magic of capturing moments on camera reignited her own sense of wonder. Their enthusiasm reminded her why she had fallen in love with photography in the first place: to see the world differently, to find beauty in the ordinary, and to tell stories that mattered. Through volunteering, Sarah also met someone who would play a pivotal role in her journey: Daniel, a fellow volunteer and art teacher at the center. Unlike Alex, whose spontaneity had thrilled but ultimately overwhelmed her, Daniel was steady and grounded. He listened without judgment, offered thoughtful advice, and shared her belief in the power of creativity to heal and inspire. Their connection grew slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values. They spent weekends exploring museums, hiking trails, and discussing their dreams for the future. With Daniel, Sarah felt safe, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. As her relationship with Daniel deepened, Sarah found herself reflecting on the lessons she had learned throughout her 30s. She understood now that happiness wasn't a destination, it was a practice. It required effort, patience, and a willingness to embrace imperfection. She also realized that success wasn't defined by external achievements. It was measured by the impact she had on others and the legacy she left behind. Whether it was mentoring young photographers, supporting her clients' visions, or simply being present for her loved ones, Sarah knew that her purpose lay in connecting with people and creating meaningful experiences. By the time she turned 38, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. She still faced challenges. Life, after all, was unpredictable. But she approached them with grace and resilience. She had learned to balance ambition with self-care, independence with interdependence, and dreams with reality. One crisp autumn afternoon, as she stood on a hill overlooking the city, camera in hand, Sarah took a moment to reflect. The road behind her had been winding and uneven, filled with peaks and valleys. But looking ahead, she saw endless possibilities stretching out before her like a horizon. "Thank you," she whispered softly, addressing her younger self, "for holding on, for learning, for growing. You did good." And with that, she raised her camera, framed the perfect shot, and clicked, capturing not just the scene before her, but the essence of her journey thus far. As Sarah approached her 40th birthday, she found herself pausing more often, to breathe, to reflect, and to appreciate the moments that once seemed so ordinary, but now felt extraordinary. Her 30s had been a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and transformation, and she was finally beginning to see the bigger picture. The scars of her past struggles were still there, faint but visible, a reminder of battles fought and lessons learned, but they no longer weighed her down. Instead, they served as markers of her resilience, proof that she had emerged stronger from every trial. One evening, while flipping through an old journal she had kept during her early 20s, Sarah came across a list titled "Things I Want to Achieve Before I Turn 40." Reading it now, she couldn't help but smile at the naivety of her younger self. Some items on the list were laughably ambitious: travel to every continent, while others were painfully specific: marry by age 28. But as she read further, she noticed something interesting. Many of the things she had once deemed essential no longer mattered to her. The milestones she had obsessed over, getting promoted, buying a house, finding the own, had lost their shine. What mattered now were the intangibles, the relationships she had nurtured, the lives she had touched, and the person she had become. Sarah realized that her 30s hadn't just been about achieving goals. They had been about redefining them. It wasn't about ticking boxes or meeting deadlines. It was about living authentically, embracing imperfection, and finding joy in the process rather than the outcome. This epiphany led her to another realization. Time was both fleeting and infinite. Fleeting because the days slipped away faster than she could grasp them. Infinite because each moment held endless potential. She began to cherish the present more deeply, savoring the small joys, a warm cup of tea on a cold morning, a heartfelt conversation with a friend, the golden glow of sunlight streaming through her window. Her relationship with Daniel had also evolved into something beautiful and enduring. They weren't perfect together. They argued. They disagreed. They stumbled. But they always found their way back to each other. Their bond was built not on grand gestures but on quiet acts of kindness, making breakfast for each other on lazy Sundays, holding hands during difficult conversations, supporting each other's dreams without judgment. Together, they started dreaming of the future, not as individuals but as partners. They talked about adopting a child, traveling to places they had never been, and maybe even starting a foundation to support young artists. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt ready to step into the unknown, knowing that she wouldn't have to face it alone. But before she could fully embrace the next chapter, Sarah knew she needed to make peace with the one she was leaving behind. She decided to write a letter to her younger self, a message filled with the lessons she wished she had known sooner. Dear younger me, Daniel remained her steadfast companion, their relationship growing stronger with each passing day. Together, they adopted a spirited young girl named Lily, whose laughter filled their home with warmth and light. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges, sleepless nights, endless questions, and moments of doubt. But it also brought immeasurable joy. Watching Lily explore the world with wide-eyed wonder reminded Sarah to see life through a lens of curiosity and gratitude. One summer afternoon, while helping Lily take her first photographs, Sarah felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who had stood on a balcony years ago, staring at the city lights and whispering promises to herself. That girl had been searching for something she couldn't quite name. Now, standing in her backyard with her daughter by her side, Sarah finally understood what it was. Connection. Connection to herself, to others, to the world around her. It was the thread that wove through every lesson she had learned, every challenge she had faced, and every triumph she had celebrated. As the years went by, Sarah began sharing her story, not just through her work, but through talks, workshops, and eventually, a memoir titled Lessons I Wish I Knew in My 30s. The book became a beacon of hope for countless readers who resonated with her struggles and drew strength from her resilience. In one particularly poignant passage, she wrote, "Life doesn't come with a roadmap. There are no guarantees, no shortcuts, no perfect paths. What we do have is choice, the choice to grow, to love, to persevere. And though the road may twist and turn, it is ours to walk, ours to shape, and ours to embrace." The memoir wasn't just a reflection of Sarah's journey. It was an invitation for others to embark on their own. Readers reached out to her, sharing their stories of struggle and triumph, and Sarah responded to each message with heartfelt encouragement. She realized that her purpose extended beyond her personal achievements. It lay in lifting others up, just as she had been lifted along the way. By the time Lily started school, Sarah had become a pillar of her community. She volunteered regularly, mentored young entrepreneurs, and advocated for causes close to her heart. Her life was far from perfect. There were still moments of uncertainty, heartache, and fear, but she faced them with a quiet confidence born of experience. On a crisp autumn morning, as she walked hand in hand with Lily to her first day of kindergarten, Sarah paused to take in the scene around her. The trees were ablaze with fiery hues of orange and red, the air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the streets buzzed with the energy of a new season. "Monty, are you okay?" Lily asked, tugging gently at her hand. Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm more than okay," she replied softly. "I'm grateful." And she meant it. grateful for the journey that had brought her here, for the lessons that had shaped her, and for the people who had walked beside her. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed and kissed her goodnight, Sarah sat by the window, gazing at the stars twinkling in the night sky. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who had doubted, feared, and yearned for answers. "You did good," she whispered, addressing her younger self. "You figured it out, one step at a time." And for the first time in her life, Sarah truly believed it.